firstly, welcome for the people that are watching online. We're super excited about tonight, and also to talk about our topic, which is student as partner and increasing diversity. So my name's Mike Baldwin, and I am fortunate to lecture at Curtin University, where I am in the School of Marketing and Management, and I teach in strategic career design. And I'm also very lucky to co-teach a unit with the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So super amazing to collaborate with Jackie and Bridge. So I thought maybe I could just throw to you, Jackie, and to Bridge to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name's Jackie. I teach in the School of Management with Management and Marketing here with Mike as well. So we're in the very small, newly created subdiscipline of ethics and sustainability. And ethics is probably our area of passion, I think it's fair to say. So we're across those two neatly, closely paired units, which has led us from the pilot. And Bridge, hand over to Bridge.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Bridge. I'm the Vice President Education at the Curtin Student Guild. So I basically provide student representation on any sort of education and welfare or advocacy issues. And it's really great to be able to be here to speak to this program with Mike and Jackie tonight.
So thank you. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Bridge. Okay, so look, what I'd like to do just initially is Curtin University is on Whadjuk Noongar land, and I'd just like to quickly do an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people whose land we're standing on, and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of the Noongar people where Curtin University is situated. We pay our respects to their vibrant and endless culture and the leadership of the elders past, present and future. So this country, Whadjuk, where Curtin University is situated, has belonged to the Whadjuk Noongar people for thousands of years and is a place of learning for all people now. And Curtin University is very proud to continue on this long tradition. Okay, so look, our talk is about student as partner and increasing diversity. And I guess in very sort of broad strokes, Jackie and I ran a pilot of around 1,500 students this semester, doing a pilot on student as partner, and and broadly speaking, at most parts and most times, on balance and on the whole, it went really well. But what we recognised is that we really felt that we could, in terms of the lessons learned, target diversity, and so we were super fortunate. We've got a very proactive, talented guild, and Bridge very kindly, and Jessie very kindly, who are the president and vice president of the guild. When we sort of contact them, we're very keen to collaborate with us, and so we've been very fortunate. So I guess that's what today's about. We really want to have an eye on to how we can increase diversity in students' partner representation, and particularly targeting diversity in areas of LGBTQ, First Nations, and across student academic levels. And look, this is one that I really was blind to, and so Bridge really sort of had some great insights there. So Bridge, I wondered, look, if you wouldn't mind, could I just throw to, maybe you could speak to everyone, like what, dumb that down for me again, what that means about those sort of different student levels.
Yeah, it's essentially, I think, just acknowledging that when you're working with students in any sort of capacity, asking them to sort of serve as representatives and to sort of enter that space sort of beyond just their kind of responsibilities at a student level, that there can be a wide variety of different reasons that can sort of factor into their ability to engage in programs like that. And yeah, just sort of looking at obviously diversity within groups such as, as Mike's mentioned, sort of race, gender, sexuality, any of those kind of things. And also looking at, as we've kind of touched on here, being able to sort of ensure that you're making things as accessible as possible for students who are across a wide variety of academic levels and ability to sort of engage with and commit to, additional kind of responsibilities. So.
Yeah, look, thanks heaps, Bridge. That's so great. And when we talked at the different stages, one thing that really jumped out at me from what you were saying was, I know myself, I haven't thought about those students that, we're catering to maybe the sort of, the students that put themselves forward, the high achievers, but, for some students, that's a gold medal getting to the lecture. You know, their socioeconomic circumstances, that thing. And, you know, I must admit, I had a real blind spot there. And so I'm super grateful for your, helping us work on that particular niche. So, okay. So maybe I could just throw to Jackie to run through the agenda and kick us off.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Mike. So I think we have a slide for the agenda, but really I think it's quite simple. It barely merits a slide. What we wanted to do was just take you through quickly what we've done as our pilot program, what we have in mind in terms of what we need to do in the next step. So there's 3 particular areas of diversity that we're really keen to target. First of all, we're really keen to target students across our offshore campuses. So Curtin has around 6 offshore campuses around the world, international and increasingly travel affected students. We're very keen to target, and Mike will speak to this, our First Nations Indigenous students. And then the first one that we'll talk about in a moment is just the more broad, open-ended idea of how do we target students who perhaps don't feel super keen and confident initially in that first week or 2 when we call for volunteers to speak up. How do we avoid what Bridge was talking about with us a few days ago, which is just that one dominant voice, the kind of more dominant, more confident voices who we, of course, want to hear from, but not necessarily at the exclusion of others. So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if everyone's seeing the slides there, Mike. I can still see the acknowledgement of country, but am I a bit behind there? What should I be seeing there? Might just be me.
I've got the agenda one there. Bridge, can you see the agenda there?
Yeah, I can see the agenda one too.
Oh, okay. No worries. Let me just I'll just talk through. No worries at all. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Mike, can I just get you to maybe speak to the next slide, and I'll bring up my own copy of the slide? Sorry, is it back?
Of course, absolutely. So look, in terms of student as partners, we've applied it. Look, it's really a way to sort of empower the student voices. So through regular feedback, and obviously that looks different, in different ways for different people. But we really found through different ways having student representatives come to at the end of the class, and we would leave the room as the teachers or lecturers, and the students would take over, and then they would get that feedback, and then they would sort of say, right, it's right to come back in, and then we would sort of take that feedback, or through email or other avenues. We've had sort of different approaches. So, essentially, this is mediated, scope defined, and the expectations are managed with the students. So it's not really about customer service, that sort of consumer model. It's very much sort of collaborative and a partnership. So look, here's a quote. The approach is not a blank check to change anything at all about the unit, but there's sort of examples of things that are easy to improve and that are only visible really from the perspective of the student. And I think Jackie, you had that sort of great quote from Aristotle or Plato about obviously your dinner guests are probably better placed to tell you about the quality of the meal rather than the cook. So, Jackie, maybe I could throw back to you. This is the formative assessment student voice slide, is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think that's really the best way to put it. And most of us, I think, are familiar with the idea of the importance of formative assessment, which is just that, how am I going? Am I on track? But we most often apply it to, or in my experience, we've most often applied it to the student experience and student performance. Was really the way Mike pitched it to me when he first explained to me was, look, it's really just a way of us directing the student voice at ourselves and doing that formative assessment week by week. And I think really the best way to put it is we've got a really nice quote from one of our great student as partner representatives, Jake. And we take different approaches, but really Jake put it the best, I think, when he said, look, really what it is, what student as partner is he said it's like the tutor and the student as partner reps are working together to bring the most out of each class. And I think that puts it beautifully. And really what it led to for us is the idea that that's certainly something that started to work fairly well for us. But another student quote that I suppose rings really true for us is this idea that in some organisations there might be what the bosses think of as an open door policy, but as we heard a participant express recently, that might be within a gated community. So we started thinking about the analogy of that for us. What does that mean that we have an open door policy? We're very open to the student as partner voices, but not all of our students might feel confident to speak up and volunteer as student partner representatives. So what are those kind of gates or barriers that we're not seeing? So as I mentioned, there are really 3 particular ways that we're looking to focus there. And if I can speak to the first of these particular ways, these 3 particular pilot initiatives we're looking to take around increasing the diversity of our student as partner reps. The first is really, I suppose, the most open-ended one, and really it comes about because, as you can imagine, in the first week or two, like a lot of programs, we outline the student as partner representative program to our students, and we ask for volunteers at the start of the semester. And obviously that lends itself to students who already maybe feel a little bit confident, who are used to having their voices heard. Some of them push through some nervousness or anxiety, but we're really aware that there would be very much students maybe at the back of the room who were sitting there thinking, maybe do I, don't I, but are a little bit less confident to speak up. And students who maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks down the track think, oh, maybe I wish I had have spoken up, and I do feel confident now I'm seeing the way it works. So this was probably one of the first conversations that we had with Bridge and Jessie at the Guild, and said, look, what we're trying to do here is think about how do we avoid just having students who self-select through that initial confidence and expand the opportunities here, especially perhaps for students who have diversity barriers that we're not particularly aware of. And this is where, in a sec, I'll hand over to Bridge, because Bridge gave us the brilliant idea, which was, look, what if we had a handover halfway through the semester? And the idea would be that the student as partner reps, the original ones, halfway through the semester, would hand over the role to some new volunteers who maybe felt a little bit empowered during the semester. And the good thing about that would be, amongst other things, we're really focused on making sure that our student as partner reps develop some strong vocational skills and some co-curricular skills, I guess, some employability skills. So the idea would be that we step out of the room, the student as partner reps, the original ones, train up, if you will, hand over the role to the new reps, and they themselves can develop some leadership skills. But really keen to ask Bridge to say a few words on that, because it's Bridge's idea, first of all, and I think Bridge expresses it better than I can.
Yeah, I think it's just one of the things that really struck me initially when we were meeting around this program was that a majority of the issues and obstacles that have kind of come up that we've touched on already and what we'll discuss for the rest of the presentation are ones that we see kind of unanimously across the board when we're working with students in these kind of representative roles. And they're, yeah, absolutely not isolated issues to this sort of case. And they're ones that we come across very regularly with student representatives at the Guild. And in that sort of environment where we've got very like short terms and high turnover of representatives, as a sort of method of increasing this diversity and ensuring that a really broad range of student voices can be heard, is through this handover process, where at the end of each term, students go through the process of doing a little bit of that sort of succession planning and ensuring that the person who they're going to be passing over to is adequately sort of prepared to do that. And this, in this sort of context within a pilot like this, it really sort of does help target those students who may not have felt comfortable to speak up initially, who have gotten more comfortable and kind of gotten more familiar with the process and built a little bit more of that community with the people who might be handing over to them. And it ticks a lot of the boxes, I think, in terms of that sort of really like targeted way of increasing the diversity of student reps, ensuring that as many people as possible get a go, and really sort of taking part in that really awesome community building and upskilling that can sort of come out of processes like this.
I think that's so well put. Thanks, Bridge. And I love that element that speaks to building the community. One of the things that works, one of the strengths of the way that we run the student as partner approach is, and what terrified me about it at first when Mike explained the concept to me, was that we as instructors step out of the room for 5-10 minutes at the end of each class to allow the student as partner reps to get that feedback. So I love the idea of them building that community in that time and then using that to hand over to the new rep. So yeah, thanks. All right. Yeah, so absolutely. So that, I think, explains reasonably well this first of the 3 elements of our diversity increasing pilot that we're trying. And we're really hoping that that will allow the student as partner reps, the original ones, to develop and exercise those leadership skills, and also for the rest of the class to see the benefit of diversity in that the new student as partner reps who step up halfway through the semester will bring their own different approach to it. And we hope the students as a whole, as a community, I guess, will see the benefit of that, which is terrific. And then we come on to, I suppose, our second element, the second way in which we're attempting to increase the diversity. And this is something that I think is increasingly familiar to other universities, but was quite new to me when I joined Curtin full-time a couple of years ago. And this is the idea that we have actually quite a few campuses around the world for Curtin. So we obviously are all based here in Bentley in Western Australia, but Curtin has around 6 or 7 other global campuses in places like Dubai, Malaysia, Singapore, Mauritius. And increasingly, we also have students who are travel affected as well. So the picture isn't always as clear as students studying in Dubai and attending campus in Dubai. So you might see from the slide there that we have all sorts of differentiation in terms of citizenship. But it might mean, for example, that we have a lot of students who are travel restricted, can't currently leave, say, mainland China or India, and they're nominally studying through our campuses in Malaysia or Singapore, but they're forced to study online. So it's very different from that picture that we traditionally have of attending and teaching face-to-face classes. So we have students who are often dealing with a couple of cultural barriers, perhaps between themselves and the campus they're studying, and then us emailing them as the unit coordinator on top of that. And there's often as well cultural barriers around things like a big power distance. Sometimes the student engagement can be low because of cultural factors or because of distance factors. And we're also very aware that at a lot of our offshore campuses, the employment situation of the local instructors is a lot less secure. So it adds a lot of difficulties into the mix in terms of either suggesting uptake of the student as partner approach or really expecting students to be able to do that. So as I mentioned, this is the second element of our pilot to increase diversity and make sure that we don't just find ourselves dominated by the voice of students from here in Bentley and create another form of that kind of gated community. So the approach we're taking in the pilot is really to take a slightly different approach where we reach out for student as partner volunteers at the offshore campuses, but maybe instead of weekly, week by week check-in, we leave it for them to go out, maybe source some anonymous feedback from their peers where they feel comfortable. We provide their email address so that the offshore students can email them anonymously. And then a couple of times during the semester, we'll have an online chat in our learning management system with our local offshore, with our offshore representatives. And they can, in the meantime, email us anonymous feedback from the students directly. We also sometimes have students who will turn up with an absolute clipboard full of great suggestions and feedback items. They polled their classmates and they come to us to give us really their picture of the world, to let us know exactly what's happening on the ground, say in Mauritius or Miri, and what the online students are facing. And that's so far been a slightly different model that works reasonably well in terms of treading more gently on those kind of cultural sensitivities or level of comfort that those students have. So I'll hand over to Mike to talk about the third of our diversity projects. And as you can imagine from our acknowledgement of country at the start, for us being here in Bentley, working well with our local Aboriginal students is a really major focus for us. So I'm really keen to hear from Mike on this one.
Yes, so look, we're very fortunate, Curtin, to have the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, which is probably the leading or one of the leading Indigenous institutions in Australia for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I am very fortunate myself to co-teach a unit. So in the School of Management and Marketing, we co-teach a unit with the Centre for Aboriginal Studies around cultural awareness. So I guess, sort of thinking about how we might approach, we've had some early initial discussions with the Centre for Aboriginal Studies. And look, the challenge really is doing this in a sort of, in a respectful and sensitive way. And also, the risk really is here, there's a bias towards how we've sort of conventionally ran it. And, the reason we want to get away from that is because, there's been a, sort of a long and ignoble sort of, level of paternalism around engagement with Indigenous Australians. And what we want to do is be able to engage in a sensitive and respectful way with both the leadership of CAS and also the Indigenous students that we're fortunate to have. Essentially, in terms of approaching that, how student as partner might look completely different, and that'll be very much guided by our consultation with the Centre for Aboriginal Studies leadership and the Indigenous students themselves. So that may involve physically meeting at the Centre for Aboriginal Studies. which is a designed by Indigenous architects, and is a space set out for Indigenous scholars and our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. It might, in terms of delivery, here's something sort of getting into the weeds. Here might be a way of delivery, might be slightly different. It might involve yarning circles. So here's a picture of a yarning circle. Traditionally, I know Jackie and I come from philosophy, so we have this dialectical approach. We have this robust back and forth, this sort of, sometimes quite competitive, argument. And with the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, I've been sort of listening and learning from the educators there. The yarning circle is completely different. So you sit in a circle, one person talks at a time, and every other person says absolutely nothing. And then this just works like that, which, for an academic like myself who likes to center my own voice, would be a challenge. But, so that's sort of an example of how it might be cashed out differently. So we really want to focus on those relationships, essentially. But centrally, the main thing will be using the ways of working, the cultural awareness program that the Centre for Aboriginal Studies has developed for, identifying aspects of cross-cultural communication and enhancing that sort of relationship. So it'll be very much driven by the Indigenous leaders and students we have and how that looks. And we've got some sort of meetings coming up. We're at that early stage, but coming up with the leadership there and some of the representatives. Okay, so maybe I could just throw to, in the remaining time, Jackie just about the sort of next steps and to wrap up, and then we can maybe have some questions.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think I really do want to stress that we're super keen to hear from everyone else, because we see these as really three pretty early pilots, throwing some lines out to see what happens and what comes of that. As you can see, we're really super supportive. Really grateful for Bridge for the support there and the suggestions. So, really the way we see it is look, we had a pretty good shot at it. The pilot so far, we have had some great feedback from students, really enjoying hearing from the student voice. But it's really these three main areas of just opening up in general the diversity, maybe some areas we're not aware of, the handover, and then the offshore and intercultural diversity. And then the Centre for Aboriginal Studies, making sure our First Nations students feel empowered and represented to speak up. We're really excited to see how those three things will go as we roll out the pilot of them, and incredibly keen to hear from everyone else, whether you have similar experiences, whether you have suggestions, questions, anything like that.